Amen. We can talk about real football teams real quick. You put out a tremendous piece in the middle of the season last year, discussing the Buffalo Bills and Sean McDermott and everything of that nature. And then obviously over the past few weeks, big trade goes down. Buffalo sent Stefon Diggs to Houston in return for a 2025 second round pick. They also sent a couple, I think, day 3 picks over along with Diggs. And you highlighted some things in terms of Diggs' relationship with the Bills, McDermott, and things of that nature. And a lot of things have been reported since the trade. What are your thoughts overall on everything? What this means for Buffalo going forward? What it means for Stefon Diggs going forward now in Houston? Just your overall takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, it was time, and it got to this point for a reason where it was just irreparable. Like they couldn't work together. Everything I was told is what I reported back in the series you referenced in December, that Stefon Diggs had enough of the head coach, Sean McDermott. They did not see eye to eye. And I think there's a lot that goes into that. That's not saying one person is right and one person is wrong necessarily. I do think that maybe this offseason, when you had the changes to the roster that they had, right? I mean, a lot of veterans leaving. Mitch Morse,
Right.
Jordan Poyer, Tre'Davious White, Gabe Davis, Tyrell Dodson. They've lost a lot. I mean, Leonard Floyd was just there a year, but they're clearly going to be a younger team. So I'm sure Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane are looking at this as, okay, we need younger players to emerge as leaders, as core voices that people rally around and set a good example. I'm sure they're not thrilled with the example Stefon Diggs is setting in a lot of different ways. And I'm sure there's some of that Josh Allen relationship stuff sprinkled in there. Clearly, that went sideways a little bit, but I'm just, players have told me that it was McDermott related in terms of why Stefon Diggs wanted out. And I'm sure the Bills got to a point where they're like, okay, Steph, like we won a lot of games without you. This is a different offense. We don't necessarily need, one go-to receiver that needs the ball 12, 13 times a game. We're going to spread it out. Dalton Kincaid, James Cook. They've got to draft a couple of receivers. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
So I have a hard time having like a really strong opinion and saying like, the Bills are dead ass wrong here, or Stefon Diggs is a pain in the ass. Like the truth somewhere in the middle. I'll say this though, Jared. I do feel like these relationships get to this point when often they don't need to get to this point. When you traded for Stefon Diggs, you probably knew what you were getting into, right? Like he wanted out of Minnesota. A lot of that had to do with Mike Zimmer, the offense, kind of becoming this power rushing attack, which is kind of what the Bills did to an extent last year. But you do know, like these number one receivers, they do come with baggage when they're arriving at the airport, and you better have a plan in place. I just talked to Herm Edwards about this for a series at the site, on how the Bills can kind of smash their Super Bowl window wide open. And Herm made a great point. He said he learned this from Tony Dungy, where you kind of have to identify 3-4 players on your team that as the head coach, you've got to develop a different kind of relationship with. You've got to go out of your way to really get to know that player, and it does take a little bit of maintenance. And look, the wide receiver position is full of those kinds of players.
Yeah.
I mean, look at this class coming in. You're going to have red flags on just about anybody that you can probably draft if you're Buffalo. So you've got to work with a player to a point. Maybe it reached a point of no return, right? Maybe there's something we don't know, and I'm open to that. Maybe it was worse than anybody could imagine behind the scenes, and the Bills had to move on. But man, he's still a talent. I don't think he's washed up. I think it was just a different offense the second half of the year. The first half of the year, he was having a career year. I
Yeah,
don't
I
think
mean
Diggs is done. I think he'll go to Houston and be good.
yeah.
But they're in this point for a reason. They've got to draft a couple receivers, and that receiver's probably going to have something to him that you have to work with if you're Sean McDermott and the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Diggs' production in the first 6 weeks compared to the rest of the stretch. I mean, he had 5 100-yard games in the first 6 weeks. And then after that, things, I don't want to say he, quote unquote, fell off because I think that's a little bit disrespectful. But I mean, you look at the numbers. I mean, the game against Kansas City, I think it was 4 catches for 24 yards. There was a lot of games like that where, and a lot of that, like you said, had to do with the change in the offense and whatnot. James Cook became more of a vital part of the offense. He was 4th in the league in scrimmage yards very quietly last year. So the Bills, once Joe Brady became the offensive coordinator, I think you pointed out the run game became more of a focal point. And I'm intrigued to see what that's going to look like with the full year of Joe Brady. I also, when it comes to Buffalo, I have a hard time counting them out as long as they have 17 under center. Like that, he's a pretty big get out of jail free card. I made this analogy last week. Having an elite quarterback is like having a bidet. It cleans up a lot of shit. And I think that Josh Allen is one of the ultimate bidets in the NFL to have if you're an NFL team.